Hello, and thank you for your time today. If I asked you where U.S. clinical innovation is actually happening, which therapeutic areas are accelerating, which are stalling, and where trials are clustering, most would probably answer with intuition rather than evidence. Our team, Dane Morgan, Everest Orloff, and myself, Lisa Acquaviva, set out to change that. We built the Global Trial Intelligence Map to transform raw registry data into a clear, interactive intelligence layer that shows where innovation is happening, who is driving it, and how difficult it is to advance therapies through the pipeline. The core challenge we face is that the U.S. clinical trial landscape is enormous and highly fragmented, with no unified way to understand how activity varies across therapeutic areas, sponsor, and phases. That lack of structure makes it difficult for stakeholders to identify where innovation is happening or how mature different pipelines really are. Our solution was to build a web-based dashboard that organizes this complexity into a clear, interactive intelligence map. By aggregating and filtering US-based interventional trials and then visualizing them across sponsor, therapeutic area, and phases, we created a tool that makes these patterns easy to explore. The impact is practical. The dashboard supports evidence-based decisions around investment priorities, competitive benchmarking, and pipeline risk assessment. It gives users a way to move beyond intuition and see the clinical landscape with clarity. To bring structure to such a complex landscape, we centered our work on one strategic question. How do therapeutic areas differ in their clinical trial activity across phases, geography, and time? And what does that reveal about development trends and pipeline difficulty? We broke this into three analytical lenses that shape the dashboard. The sponsor landscape, which examines who holds the largest trial footprints and where trials are geographically concentrated. The disease area explorer, who shows how therapeutic areas rise, fall, or shift over time, including disruptions like COVID-19, and the phase distribution view, which reveals differences in maturity and scientific difficulty across therapeutic areas. These lenses give a clear, structured way to understand the U.S. clinical ecosystem. Our data foundation is clinicaltrials.gov, the authoritative U.S. federal registry. We focused on U.S. located interventional trials and map conditions to 5 major therapeutic area buckets. Key fields driving our analysis are such as national clinical trial numbers, the unique identifier assigned to every registered study, otherwise known as NCT number. As we explored the dataset, we narrowed our focus to fields that directly support our analytical objectives, and only after understanding the data did we go back and apply color and coding. This intentionally highlighted the most essential patterns, giving users a way to move beyond intuition and interpret the therapeutic area landscape more easily by reducing cognitive load. To ensure every insight is traceable back to source data, we built a transparent, repeatable pipeline. We began with bulk acquisition from clinicaltrials.gov, then moved into cleaning and filtering, removing non-interventional records, standardizing sponsor names, and mapping trial locations to zip codes. Next, we classified trials into therapeutic areas, phase groups, and state locations using calculated fields. We then aggregated trial counts, and finally, after reviewing the information across multiple views, and once the analytical patterns were clear, we refined the dashboard's visual design. I'll now hand it over to Dane, who will walk through our design process.
Thanks, Lisa. We began sketching ideas around 3 major trends following exploratory data analysis. First, we noticed a large amount of cancer-specific sponsors within CT-Gov submissions. Although we felt the word cloud did not provide sufficient insights for our disease area dashboard. Second, we noticed a steep increase in clinical trials since CT-Gov's inception in 1996. However, without breaking out the number of trials by sponsor or indication, the chart did not answer any of our strategic questions, only that more trials are happening now than 30 years ago. Third, we determined a majority of clinical trial funding comes directly from the industry, but after exploring NASDAQ data further, we found the scope too broad to discuss in one dashboard and removed financial elements from our strategic focus. After iterating on different design types, we landed on exploring the potent effect of region on clinical trial presence. Dense, urban areas surrounding major regulatory or knowledge bodies displayed the highest prevalence of sponsor operations. Now, when I move into the live demo, I'll provide you with an overview of how to navigate this 3-part dashboard, explore by sponsor, and interestingly refute or affirm our key strategic questions. Let's look to see if a prolific sponsor like Pfizer carries a similar trend to the industry described on the last slide. As you can see, northeastern states like New York and urban areas in Texas still hold much of Pfizer's clinical activity. We can also notice that Pfizer has a similar increase in infectious disease studies around COVID-19 and a strong oncology portfolio. We notice an interesting deviation when exploring Pfizer's phase distribution. Due to their heavy oncology presence, the number of phase 1 studies is much higher than the industry average, reinforcing oncology's early phase dominated research.
Thanks, Dane. Diving a bit more into the details of the dashboard, the first view displays the geographic distribution of clinical trials across the US. Trial activity is heavily clustered along the Northeast Corridor, along with dense pockets around major cities nationwide. States like Texas, California, and New York lead the way in clinical activity, while states like Alabama, Delaware, and Idaho fall at the bottom. What's striking here is the scale of that gap, which ranges from just 202 trials in the lowest state to nearly 20,000 in the highest. And that significant disparity really underscores how uneven access to clinical research is across the country. Patients in some regions simply have far more opportunities to participate in trials than others. The second view tracks trial volume by therapeutic area. Most areas show steady long-term growth, but two trends stand out. First, infectious disease saw a sharp spike in 2020, jumping from about 1,000 to over 4,000 studies, which was a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. That spike was short-lived, though, with a rapid decline back down as pandemic-related research wound down. Second, oncology stands out for consistency. It maintained high trial volume right through 2020 without the temporary dip we see in other therapeutic areas, and that resilience helped it climb to become the leading therapeutic area, nearing 7,000 studies by 2025. The third view breaks down clinical trials by phase. Oncology dominates early phase research, starting at more than 50,000 studies, far above any other area, but it drops sharply by late phase, where it converges with the other therapeutic areas. That steep decline is consistent with the historically high failure rate we see in cancer drug development, where many candidates are tested early, but far fewer make it through to later stages. Looking at the bottom chart, the overall phase distribution skews heavily towards early stage research, making up about 60% of total trials, and that skew underscores just how much investment and attrition happen before a treatment ever reaches the market. Now we bring everything together to answer our strategic questions. On sponsor landscape, clinical trial activity is heavily concentrated in the Northeast and around major cities, pointing to uneven infrastructure and investment across regions. On disease area, oncology has emerged as the most dominant and resilient therapeutic area, while infectious disease activity was almost event driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. And on trial maturity, the pipeline narrows from early to late phase across every therapeutic area, but most dramatically in oncology, reflecting how difficult it is for candidates to get to market. And together, this tells us that clinical trial activity in the US reviews a system where geographic inequity, external shocks, and scientific difficulty together determine which therapies advance and where patients get access to them. Thank you.